Good evening and welcome to Mindful Life 281. I am your host Nathan Spring. I am your co-host Nathan Springer, joined by my host Leora Springer. And welcome. It is the 4th of August, first day of back to school, the first week of school in the new school year, in the new school term. How has it been? Well, we're talking about some activities to do with that, and we will cover some of the school reopening bacchanal, as there always is some kind of bacchanal as schools reopen. But we recently celebrated 61 years of independence. 61 years of independence, and what have we to show for that? Independence is a strange thing when you really think about it. Make sure you hit that like button, double tap the screen over there on TikTok. That's how you hit the like button on TikTok. You double tap that screen. Like over on Instagram. And if you are viewing this on repeat over there on YouTube, Nathan Spring on YouTube. If you are not subscribed, I think you should subscribe sometime really soon. Head over to YouTube, Nathan Spring on YouTube, and go subscribe there. The lives, you can catch them on repeat and all of that over there. Also, as usual, this is brought to you by Mindful Education, the educational institution that I run. We offer learning pods from preschool go all the way up to CXC. Those are in part-time and full-time. We started a full-time class just today actually. So yeah, if you are interested in those learning pods, more homeschool oriented teaching styles, if you are interested in that for your students from preschool go all the way up to CXC, get in contact with us. We also offer individual one-on-one private tutoring for most CXC and CAPE subjects. Anyway, we're getting back right into the news, because 61 years of independence, and as I was saying, independence is a kind of strange thing when you really think about it. When you consider good night, Paul Duncan, when you consider how independence worked, there are some things to scratch your head about. Colonialism was basically a group of people decided that good night, Jacques Jones Carter. A group of people decided that basically they were going to squat on whichever land they could occupy. Now, some of it was a bit of violent squatting. Some of it would have been a bit more peaceful, because not all of the land was very occupied. And some of the land arguments, I mean, okay, I understand some of it. But, they were like squatters. They came in and squatted all over the place. Some places they stole land. Now, in Africa and those kind of places, there was a bit of difference, because there were a lot of people there already. But for example, in the Caribbean here, after they killed out much of the natives, and to be very honest, there were not a massive population of natives amongst some of these islands. So after these squatters came here, they took control for a couple hundred years. They brought in a bunch of people, and then at some point in time, when squatting on the land no longer became profitable to them, they just left it to the bunch of people who were there. Now, the reason I would say it no longer became profitable to them is because most colonial powers, when the land was profitable to them, if the people wanted independence, they didn't just give it to them. When the United States wanted independence from their British colonial power, they couldn't just say, okay, give us independence and we're going to start running things. No, they literally had to fight them off. Similarly, when Haiti wanted independence, they couldn't just tell France, give us it, and they were like, okay, fine, go ahead. That's not how it worked. They had to fight them off. So just understanding that when you look at the reality that we were given our independence, not only us, many other Caribbean countries, many other former colonies were given their independence. And you look at that and you could kind of, how independent would it have been really and truly? I don't think these colonial powers would have given up the control if they could have continued managing these things profitable. So from the very jump, some of these territories that are now independent were difficult to manage and not exactly profitable, and had poor work norms, poor societal norms in the first place. They were problematic places to begin with. World War II led to the independence, yes, to a great extent. Britain was overstretched and they could no longer afford to keep some of these colonies running. Yes. But looking back and 61 years to the future, how are we managing up and squaring up to some of this? Let's look at an article I saw here. Still adhering to colonial rules. On Friday, I visited the Colonial branch of the Ministry of Works and Transport to have an error fixed regarding the digitalization of my certified copy for my vehicle. An error made by the Ministry of Works and Transport which prevented me from getting my vehicle inspected and for which I am liable in law. After being advised that this was the proper course of action, he went there. After lying up in queue, I was advised that my attire was inappropriate, though in my view decent and respectable, as I was wearing short pants and Birkenstock sandals, and which was not in conformity with the ministry's dress code, even though I was not in an office and I was in the inspection pit area. But that is beside the point. I had previously attended to business at First Citizens, a state-owned bank, with the same attire and without incident. And regularly you hear people complain about some of these things. Regularly you hear people complain about some of these things, and I don't like the response sometimes you see from Trinidadians. Like, if you hear people complain about it, it's because Trinidadians don't like rules. We are too unlawful and disorderly of a people. That's what's going on here, and I find that to be a ridiculous statement. If someone is saying that a short pants and a Birkenstock sandal has nothing to do with whether they could appropriately carry out an inspection on their vehicle, the answer to that isn't whether they're too disorderly. The answer to that is tell them, what does the long pants and shoe have to do with inspecting their vehicle? That's how you debate that. But a lot of people in Trinidad, they don't care for sense behind rules. Once the rules are there, we are to follow the rules. The rules are put down there by the people, you know. The rules are the rules, the laws are the laws, you know. And I find that to be such a colonial kind of mindset, where we think of things as if they were placed there by our superiors. We think of the system as if the system was created, crafted, and placed there by our superiors. And our duty is to go in and just keep our heads down and as much as possible acquiesce to the system that we find ourselves in. Do not attempt to tweak the system. That's the people and the system. Not your system, that's the people's system. So you just go in there and work along with the system. And I think some of that could be part of the reason why we have such a corrupt atmosphere also in the country, where we are okay with such a level of corruption, because it's not like we need to attempt to change the systems or to tweak the systems or to put our views in on how we should run ourselves. No. What we need to do is go there and try and work our way around the system. And that's a colonial mindset. When the colonial powers were there, you couldn't go in and attempt to get them to change a policy, attempt to get them to change any view or any law. What you would have to do is figure out a way to work around the law. And Trinis seem like we were especially good at that. Tricky Dadians, the lot of us as we are called. We should rise against them. Against who, Ziza? Rise against who? Against ourselves? That's exactly the point I am making. Rise against them is a colonial talking point. We are them. Hello, Rani. You missed the co-host. We are them to some extent. Politics is downstream of culture, the saying goes. The reason our politics is the way it is because the culture is the way it is. The culture is the way it is, where we say the law is the law. Where we are okay with things being as they are. We are not them they reach. I don't know what you're talking about, Ziza. You kind of stopped making sense to me there. Economist looks at TNT at 61. Hey, Trini Hotep. Economist looks at TNT at 61. While Trinidad and Tobago's economy has made significant strides over the past 61 years, there are several avenues for further progress. Economist Professor Roger Hossain has said, Hossain said one of the gains TNT has been able to achieve is a significant increase in the stock of human capital through university education in the country. Indeed, the employed labor force with a university degree increased from 23,200 in 1991 to 144,600 in 2022. He said, My apologies. You missed the host herself. Me as the co-host, I'm just following on as she goes to bed. You know, she got tired and just left the program. The host is the star. She does as she pleases. When she feels to come in, she comes. When she feels to take a rest, she leaves. And such is the life of the host when you're a celebrity. But listen, that's a significant figure that the Economist was quoting. 23,200 was the number of people in our labor force with university degrees in 1991. That number changed to 144,600 in 2022. Now, there is some positive to that. There is some good to that. Educating your labor force is a positive thing usually, but that also could provide some problems in terms of supply and demand. I was reading a story. Now, the story actually focused on crime and the drug situation down on the East Coast. Drug dealers spread terror in coastal communities, and if we get some time, we would dive into some of that insane drug situation going on the East Coast. But there was just a little bit of a story inside here that I found interesting. A lady complaining just outside of Mayaro MP Rushton Parry's office on the junction. This is from that story. A Polori vendor spotted Guardian Media's cameras and began complaining bitterly about her hardships. If somebody takes a gun and shoots me and kills me, it's just like I will come out of all this trouble that I'm going through right now, she said. Listen to this. The Polori vendor in Mayaro. A Polori vendor in Mayaro. I have 2 children who come out of university. One did biochemistry, and 2 years now, he applying all over the country, and he ain't have a job right now. He cannot set up a house or a family. He is 26. My daughter just came out of university. She has a bachelor's and master's and is still unemployed. And my last son going to do medicine. Look how hard I have to be working. My husband not working. I have to stand up in the hot sun to sell polori and pepper roti to survive, to send my children to school. Right now, it is really hard. It comes like I'm minding my children back again like primary school children. I understand what Tanti is saying fully. And I could understand her frustration. Because to some extent, she did the right thing. She did what was said that she was supposed to do. Hi, love. She's back. She did what they said she was supposed to do, basically. She worked hard. She sent her children right through the education system, pushed her children, paid for them to go through primary, paid for them to go through secondary, maybe did the extra lessons for CXC, probably did the extra lessons for CAPE, probably did some extra lessons during university too, and she did all of that. They successfully got their university degrees, and now they have no jobs because the employment sector isn't suited for 122,000 people with random bachelor university degrees. That's the unfortunate thing. And what she is saying kind of belies a policy problem with what the government did. If you just give everyone free education and you tell them you are going to get a job, a nice job in whatever field you're educated in, and it's going to pay you tens of thousands of dollars because you would have a degree, that might not necessarily be true. And many people are finding that out now. I haven't used my degree 4 years now. I doubt half my year working. True. True. And that's just the reality with many of the people. Now, we'll see some of this as the economist goes on talking here, goes on speaking here. In addition to that, Hossain said we were able to improve the economy's infrastructure considerably, and we were able to allow manufacturing to grow in part because of the improved domestic income and safe regional market. We were able to create a much larger services sector, and some of our services sector firms have since spread into the region, he said. But while we made some gains, Hossain said in the last few years, we have also created a perverse structure of production and employment much more in favor of the services sector. In normal circumstances, this is not a problem. But in the case of the TNT economy, it came with premature deindustrialization and de-agriculturalization, the service is saying. For those of you, many people are pursuing degrees in areas where there are no demands. Correct. What that is saying is that many people in Trinidad like the service industry. And Trinidad and Tobago, we have created an incentive structure where many people want to work in the services industry. They don't want to work in industrialized industries. They don't want to work in the agricultural sector. And the reality is we need both of those sectors seriously. We seriously need both those sectors. And unfortunately, we skipped it. And some of that has to do with just the amount of money that flooded into our system. There were lots of people who were able to get money, basically, without putting labor out into the economy. And because they were able to get money without putting labor out into the economy, the only thing they would spend their money on generally would be services. So we had, as it were, boom in demand in the service-oriented area in our country, with many people leaving in the industrialized area and the agriculture area. Underemployed, unemployed, and underpaid is a thing in Trinidad. Why is that? Well, that's kind of obvious. If everyone gets a bachelor degree, we would still have to have someone to pick up the garbage. There are jobs in the society that require a certain pay. That's just the way it works in the economy. If everyone gets a degree, those jobs still have to be done, even by the people with degrees. Hossain said we also created a culture of rent sharing with all the attendant negative implications for labor in terms of work ethic and the distribution of labor. So rent sharing is basically as profit is made from many of these companies, it is distributed amongst the country. So many people get money, as I was just saying, from the profits made by many of these companies. So it's, as it were, a perverse incentive on work ethic. Many people get money without work. So Trinidad has a work ethic where many people believe that they have a right to get money without work, to get resources. And you know, when you say money, it sounds a little weird, but resources. To get resources without work. And that has a bad effect on our work ethic. We are seeing this. We know this. The economic rents led to fights, and the murder level in our country is at present in the top 10 in the world per capita, he said. And that's a very good point. If you talk to people in local governance or people or some police who may be willing to let you in on some of these things, the reality is a lot of gang warfare in the East-West corridor in Trinidad and Tobago has to do with spending government money. There is a direct correlation between violence among gangs, and government contracts. I was reading recently where a resident in Maloney was saying that the buildings have to paint, work start, so you know the murder's gonna start too. And isn't it a sad thing when that's understood? That from the moment contract work begins in some of these communities, because of how this happens, the spreading of that government money, the nice money that spreads, it encourages fighting for that kind of money. Because it's free money. We allowed capital expenditures as a proportion of transfers and subsidies to decline, and this constrained the pace at which our productive capabilities expanded. So basically, Trinidad and Tobago has been spending a lot of money on transfers. Transfers are, you're spending money on something that doesn't gain you a service or a product or anything. It's just sending money out there. The government spending money on social security, the government spending money on many of those programs like URP and CPEP, etc., etc., etc. A lot of those things are just transfers. Money comes into the government and they transfer it out to other people. Subsidies are similar. You just send it out there. Capital expenditures, the idea there, I'm reading from a story. Economists looks at TNT at 61. This is a story from the Daily Express. If you are on my YouTube channel over there, or if you are looking at this on repeat over on YouTube, you'll be able to see the stories that I'm reading and see it as I read. It scrolls by as I read. So you can look at this on repeat over there on YouTube. Nathan Spring on YouTube. Head over there and subscribe. Anyway, we decrease the capital expenditures, and it's all transfers and subsidies. So capital expenditures are the investments in our infrastructure, the investments in things that could actually reap benefits in the long run, while the transfers, they're just spending for today. That's like parlor money. That's like eating a kiss cake. It satisfies you, tastes good now, but there's no benefit into the future, really and truly. And that's a problem we are now. Tobago, to a large extent, it kind of compounds this. Tobago is the chief of this to some extent. A lot of their capital expenditures have dropped to like under 3% of their budget. Everything is just entitlements being spent by the government to people out there. That's a bad place to be. And in a country where we already struggle with bad work ethic, to have a situation like that only compounds it. Hossein said perhaps more than anything else, we did not sterilize the rents so that inflation climbed quickly and in part helped to choke the other export segments of the economy. In other words, we didn't balance the money that came in and money that goes out. That goes out. The money that went out, the money that came in, we didn't balance that money. We're doing some quick economics here. I am not an economist, but you know, we understand some of this. So we didn't balance all of that money that came in, that money that went out. So the inflation has to come in to actually counterbalance it. Our dollar isn't floated. So the central bank has to actually sell and buy assets to try and balance things as we import and export, etc. That's what they're supposed to do to sanitize these things. But according to the economists, we aren't doing it to the right level. So inflation sneaks up on us. The prices of goods rises to reflect the fact that we aren't actually balancing things as we should. We did not in parallel seek out ways to aggressively improve the economy's ease of doing business, and so we lost some of our competitive edge, as is reflected in the economy's real effective exchange rate, Hossein said. And that is a point. How do we wean the culture off that kind of spending? I think to some extent you just have to pull off some of those band-aids. To a large extent you have to pull off some of those band-aids. However, what he's highlighting here, I think, is another part of it. Ease of doing business. That's a massive part of it in our country. And this harkens back to what we started talking about with the remnants of colonialism. You see, colonialism never cared about ease of doing business. If you were a freed slave, a former indentured laborer, nobody cared for you to start a business. The only businesses the colony needed were the businesses created and started by people from the colonial motherlands. The people of the colony, your job was to be employed in one of these companies. You are a worker. You are a company man. You are a worker bee. Don't get these entrepreneurship thoughts and these kinds of insane things. No, 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 no. That's not your place in a colonial society. Go and get a government work. Sounds familiar, right? Now, back in the colonial days, it wouldn't have necessarily meant a government job, but it would have meant a job under a colonial company. And we still have that mindset to a large extent. You don't go out there and figure things out in the free market, put your services to sale in the free market. No. You go get a government work, and the government will take care of all of these things. Unfortunately, the government is doing a horrible job at taking care of all of these other things. But because the government is supposed to be taking care of all of these other things, there needs not be this ease of doing business. You don't have to be able to go to the licensing office and get work done quickly, because nobody cares if your business day is ruined. You may have to take 3 days to get your business done in the licensing office. That may have taken you 1 hour, but nobody cares. Nobody cares, because the people in the licensing office, their pay is sure. The majority of the workers in the country work for the public sector. Their pays are sure. They don't care if your business is stagnated. Or you imported something and you need it for your business, but it's locked on the port and it's costing you every day. Oh, shucks, too bad. What you gonna do? That's how the government work, isn't it, boy? And all through the country we have that mindset, and really and truly it starts at the very top. And personally, I regularly say this and I'll point it out again, I think the PNM is the worst party for these things. Ease of doing business, they hate it. Their party's goal is to complicate doing business as much as possible. The PNM wants you employed by the government and buying from the business people who have been in existence since Dr. Williams was on the earth. That's the PNM's modus operandi. Work for the government, let the government balance everything and take care of everything, and buy everything you need from the old business people. We have to be more industrious and show off our talents by manufacturing and food production. It's true business service stinks with attitude. It's a bit difficult, but I agree with what you're saying there, that's true. But what I'm saying is it's not just only up to the people, but there's a systemic level to this where it is difficult if you are trying to do business to get it done in this country. If you have to do imports and exports, difficulty. If you have to deal with customs, difficulty. If you have to deal with licensing, difficulty. Any government service you have to deal with, difficulty. If US dollars fall, can Trinidad can survive on their own? You mean without the US? Yes, we can survive on our own, if that's what you mean. So how do we move the economy forward? Well, according to Hossein, one of the things we have to do is focus on... If I have a successful business idea... Ooh, seems like I'm getting some problems over there on YouTube. If I have a successful business idea, and I go out into the free market, and the government isn't slowing me down or hampering me, my business is going to succeed. My business is going to grow. If I have a good business plan, it is going to grow. I don't need the government to make my business grow. If I have a successful business plan that provides a useful service or product to enough people that they are willing to pay for it, my business would grow. And as my business grows, I will become more wealthy, generally speaking. And as my business grows and I become more wealthy, I would hire more people and increase employment. Now, that is factual, but you do not need the government to give me $1 million to make that happen necessarily. You see, the problem with the government putting their finger on those scales, is oftentimes the government ends up propping up bad businesses. You see, if I'm working on the free market, if my business plan is bad, if I have a bad product, I have a bad service, I give a bad attitude, my profit margin isn't wide enough, or it's too wide, all of those things, if my business plan isn't sure and I go out on the free market, my business would collapse and I would lose, and the free market would prove that. But when the government comes in, let's say now I have a government friend, and they ensure that my business cannot collapse by sometimes ensuring a monopoly. My business starts, and then they make sure that the barriers to doing business are so high that no other competition could come in there and compete with my business. So now I don't have to care about proper business practices because I have the only one of this business in the country, and the government ensures that it is so. So some of the clothing companies in the country could do what they want, sell inferior products, sell imitation products at exorbitant prices, because they know that the government ensures the taxes surrounding importing clothing would be the taxes surrounding that would be so prohibitive that it would just be too difficult to go out there and do it. And then, just in case you still found a place that would give you a better price, customs on a whim could let you know that, okay, you imported this, but we decide that we changed the price for you. So you imported a sneaker that costed $600, and we're going to tell you it's going to need $1,400 to clear. And we just determined that on a whim. What does that do? Well, you'll never import another sneaker again. And now, go back to, let me don't call those shoe stores names. That's the problem. And that's why we need that ease of doing business. And ease of doing business, as the economist pointed out here, would not only bring in local finances. It would not only bring in local finances, because ease of doing business would ensure that more local people reinvest their money into doing business. If doing business was easy, more people will do business. You will take the extra money you have and reinvest it somewhere. Now, a lot of people in Trinidad, especially in less higher class areas, one of their popular business plans that they do is buy a car and put it on the road. Why? Because that's an unregulated business area. You could pay X dollars for a car, put it on the road, pulling bull, working as a P car instead of an H car, working as a private car for hire, and you can put it on the road, put someone to drive it, they pay you some money, they make some money, no taxes come out of that, and that deal works out well once the person is trustworthy. Why do you think so many people do that? How many people do you know buy a car and put it on the road, as they call it? Why? It's an unregulated business that is pretty easy to do in Trinidad and Tobago. You make doing business easy, more people will do it. More people will reinvest their local money into doing it. But he wasn't only talking about that domestic capital, that local money. I don't know why the live is sticking Mashipo. I don't know why that's going on. He also spoke about diaspora capital. Understand this. There are many very wealthy Trinis all around the world that do not live in Trinidad but would not have a problem having an interest in Trinidad. How many of you have aunts and uncles, or cousins and nephews and nieces, etc., grandmother, mother, brother, all kind of relatives? No, Mr. Boss, not as it is now. Who have extra capital on the outside? The only thing they could do with the extra capital is buy a barrel with some goods and send it down to you. That's the only thing they could do. But how many of them, if the ease of doing business was better, if there were not so many hurdles to cross in doing business, how many of them would have had a business idea? They're living in Canada, but they have no problem starting some kind of business locally down here. I am sure many in the diaspora would not have minded that. But a massive part of that, as the Economist also pointed out, Hossein also believes the crime situation needs to be addressed head on. We immediately call a state of emergency and go on a strong offensive against murders and home invasions. The crime situation, in my opinion, is stifling the volume of domestic capital entering the market, as well as the distribution of this capital in favor of non-tradable investment opportunities, he said. Basically, people are not investing money in businesses when they know the businesses are going to be robbed constantly. What sense does it make? Many of the Chinese are the only mini-marts left because some of the local mini-marts could not take that twice monthly robbery. That twice a month robbery, they just couldn't survive on it. So the locals sold out. The Chinese might stay for a while. But the crime situation there directly impacts the business situation in the country. So we have large hurdles preventing that ease of doing business, and then on top of that we have the crime situation where if you have to do some business you have to spend exorbitant amounts of money in security. I was seeing just recently Massey in St. Anne's was robbed. Like, what is that? Where is that story? Senior cop, robbery at Massey stores a great concern to TTPS. Terror reigned at Massey stores in St. Anne's yesterday as 5 bandits, one armed with a gun, stormed the supermarket, beating one of the 5 workers before leaving with an undisclosed sum of US and TNT currency. The daring early morning robbery caused the supermarket to shut its doors for the entire day to allow the police to conduct their investigations and interview the victims. Now, the reality is, robberies like this could only be survived by massive corporations like Massey. Some people don't understand business really and truly. Yeah, Massey was robbed in 2017 also. Same Massey. They cut through the roof, I believe, and snuck in and stole a safe with something like 100 and something thousand back in 2017. But if this was a one-off grocery, some businessman in the district has a grocery, this one grocery, and this is his only thing. Yes, when you look at his life, in his general life, if he has one largish grocery, he would be wealthy. But a grocery like that cannot survive robberies like this. A robbery like this steals more than one day of earnings from the grocery because they're stealing the safe. They traumatize your workers. They lead to shutdown, which means lost hours of opening. So you're losing money that you could have been making by the grocery being open. And you lost money through the theft. Now, they're going to very likely, the police were talking about they have to advise them on how better to secure their premises, etc., etc., etc. Very likely, whatever more they have to do to secure their premises is going to cost them money. Massey is a conglomerate. For Massey, in the grand scheme of things, to take a 1 million hit, to take a 1.5 million hit every year, trying to take care of some of these things, they could shake that off for a while. But for someone whose gross revenue for the year might be 5 million, something like that, profits aren't that high. 1 million, 1.5 million in dealing with these kind of thefts is all they could do. That's it. They cannot continue. Do you think these are inside jobs? Well, they were talking about that in the Massey. They were wondering, there were some questions about whether it was an inside job, because some things seemed very convenient, the timing and all of that. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, because it's a grocery. People could observe some of these things all on their own. And this is why I regularly say things like, say the statement that crime causes poverty more than poverty causes crime. These criminals that rob the groceries cause a lot of their local business people to stop doing business. The local business people who would have hired your local people. You're killing your own business community, killing your own economic survival, and then when the area ends up an impoverished area of squalor, a slum, then people wonder, how did that happen? Crime. So private and public security are making money off these thefts, crime, creating job opportunities. Yes, but that's a job opportunity that does not have a return. Like when the supermarket provides a resource, they provide you with something you want and you pay them in return for this. Security is just taking money from that useful trade where you provide the supermarket with money for the good. The security now comes in and takes money from that trade. So now, instead of you providing the supermarket the money just for their transport and acquisition of the good, now you have to provide the supermarket with money to pay their security. So when you go to buy the pack of milk, you don't just pay for the manufacturer. Usually the ideal is this: you pay when you go to the grocery and you buy the pack of milk, you're paying the manufacturer who manufactured it, you're paying for transport to get it to the grocery, you're paying for shelf space at the grocery, you're paying some of the groceries bills like the light bills and electricity bills, etc., and for the grocery workers, and that's where you get your price on your pack of milk there. But now you have to add to that security. And every time the security has to become a bit more sophisticated, the price for security on each bit of good, each good that you buy in that grocery, imagine there are some cents added on to your grocery bill each time for security. You know, that might actually help. That might actually help for some people to see it. If from now on the groceries start adding on onto your bill, just how you have your VAT added there, you have security cost. And every time crime goes up, you see that security cost going up and going up and going up. Because that is what is happening. A grocery that would have spent 20,000 in security in 2000 now must spend 1 or 220,000 in same security in 2024. What is that price jump going to do to the grocery? This creates ghetto community because persons leave businesses and homes for safe perceived areas. Correct. The Economist said that we should call a state of emergency. That was his view. Now, I think that the PNM will do its best to never call that state of emergency. They will attempt to do everything except call that state of emergency, because calling a state of emergency is kind of admitting failure to some extent, because they really lambasted the People's Partnership government when they did the state of emergency with the crime situation that was going on back then. So if they call the state of emergency right now, they're basically saying and suggesting that they have run out of options. And I don't think they want to do that. Now, I think if you indeed have run out of options, the best thing to do is actually call that state of emergency instead of trying to pretend that you have options. That doesn't make sense. Just for the sake of saving face, you would allow hundreds of people to continue being murdered and dozens of people to continue having their homes raided constantly, just for the sake of saving face. This is why politics is such an evil game, you know. And this is why so regularly I tell people, do not hold politicians in such a high esteem. They didn't do it for the crime back then. The last SOE was to stop the trade unions. The trade unions said that. But I don't know how much I believe that. The trade unions are typical leftists. They regularly exaggerate their power and place their hats higher than their hands could reach, overestimating their ability. The trade unions have led the workers into loss of work. Real plenty in Trinidad and Tobago. Real plenty. Let's look at something that kind of suggests that. An interesting figure. Hossain also called for a complete trade assessment of the CARICOM market to identify all the missed opportunities in which TNT had a comparative advantage. He said that data should be published and accessible to all entrepreneurs. Of critical importance are the missed opportunities on a country-by-country basis where we have comparative advantage, he said. We need to get this green hydrogen, and he went on to list several examples. So basically what he is saying there is CARICOM provides an opportunity, and that's true. CARICOM provides an opportunity where in some areas we have a comparative advantage over a CARICOM neighbor. And if we have really good knowledge of what that advantage might be, some of our entrepreneurs may be able to take advantage of it. So if we know what businesses Barbados might be lacking, what businesses Barbados might want, and some of those businesses may be right in line with some of our specialties, then maybe we could provide those businesses to Barbados. Guyana, similar. Jamaica, similar, etc. All through the CARICOM region. See what areas we have that comparative advantage in and offer it to our CARICOM neighbors. That's kind of the idea that CARICOM was supposed to be to some extent. That's the opportunity that CARICOM was supposed to give in the first place. He also said we need to allow the currency to float and let the market determine the necessary rate so that business people can engage in economic activities that involve US dollars with more certainty. And I agree 100% on that. Allowing the currency to float, allowing it to be affected by the market, the exchange rate to be affected by what we trade and how we trade. That's what determines the exchange rate, instead of the central bank having their fingers on the scale. I do not like that idea, and I think that's a scary idea. Having people with vested interests having the ability to put their thumbs on the scale around the economy. We should have never closed down Carney, Mr. Boss. That's a horrible idea. We should have closed down Carney, Petrotrin, Biwi, Wassa, not TNT probably, TSTT, nearly all the government companies, close all of them. All. Because they're all feeding frenzies, where not only the government and their friends feed off of it, but the employees feed off of it. And the people that suffer the most from this, the people that suffer the most, are the actual people that create economic activity in the country. So the creators in the country that actually make money, they have to pay for the leeches in the country that suck money without providing anything. And what many people want is for us to keep those leaching opportunities as open as possible. Carney should have remained open so everybody could have continued stealing fertilizers, stealing pesticides, stealing cane, lying about the measurements, stealing sugar, stealing rum, stealing NIS payments, It wasn't just on the political level where Carney was losing. Similarly with Petrotrin. When we have cleaners boasting about their $30,000 salary and saying that's what I deserve, well, you get what you deserve by getting what you deserve. To have better management. No. Here's the problem, Mr. Boss. State companies do not have an incentive to have better management. State companies do not have an incentive to have better management. They don't have to break a profit. They don't have to balance salaries to their expenditures and profit. They're a state company. If they lose money, they go to daddy government. Daddy government takes taxpayers' money and bails them out. I beg to differ with Petrotrin and Carney. Remove government ownership. Yes, revamp the structure. Well, when I say close down, that's actually what I meant, you know. Not close down as in not have the industry anymore. Not have the government in the industry. That's what I mean. Remove government ownership from these things. Now, the problem is because we already have government ownership, the nature of our country, just to remove government ownership would be our next side of Bacchanal. When we had to remove the government ownership from FCB, well, attempted to remove some government ownership from FCB, and we had the IPO where they sold out some of the stock. I don't know how many of you remember that Bacchanal. I don't want to call people's names because some of these people may be litigious, but there was a feeding frenzy there when the government attempted to sell off some of their stock. So some of these things we don't want the government to enter in the first place and get out as fast as possible. He also said about raising the retirement age to 65. That's for NIS. Now listen to this. Labor force participation rate. Hossain said Trinidad and Tobago needs to seek out ways to increase this country's labor force participation rate. According to the Central Bank's economic bulletin published this week, the latest data from the Central Statistical Office indicates that this country's unemployment rate fell in the first quarter of 2023. But the number of persons with jobs decreased from 8.1 thousand persons, while the number of persons without jobs and seeking employment, the unemployed, fell by 1.6 thousand persons. A contraction of the labor force by 9.7 thousand persons contributed to a decline in the labor force participation rate to 55.2% in the first quarter of 2023. Let's understand what the labor force participation rate is. The labor force is everyone who can work, everyone who is able to work, who isn't in an institution somewhere. They aren't in school, they aren't retired, they aren't in prison, they are able to work. So the labor force participation rate would be, out of those people able to work, how many people are actually working. Our participation rate is 55.2%, and it dropped from last year. That's just above half the people, according to our Central Statistical Office. The Economist spoke about places like Bahamas, where their participation rate is something like 69%. So 55% is low. Maybe if they had them all working on a productivity salary with targets, things would have been up. Maybe. But this shouldn't surprise us. This goes along with some of the things that we were talking about already, where, for example, the Polori lady from Mayaro, the example I read earlier, the Polori lady from Mayaro who spoke about having 2 children that graduated university, 2 children with university degrees, and neither of them could get a job. Her 2 children with university degrees. those children would be some of that labor force that isn't participating. How many people are there in Trinidad that get government benefits? You see, some government benefits help you to have no interest to participate in the labor force also. If you get your money some other way, then you wouldn't need to work for it. Now, this economist, and he has said this before, proposed as part of his solution that we tap into the Venezuelan workers that are very numerous in the country right now, because a large proportion of those Venezuelan workers are exactly within that workforce age range, working age, and seeing as we only have a 55% labor force rate, we could do with some more workers in our labor market, so maybe help them join some of those markets. But the economist also pointed out that part of the problem is many people aren't joining the areas in the economy where would best benefit Trinidad in the long run in the first place. Isn't that a problem? Now, some of what the economist was suggesting is actually lining up perfectly with some of what is going on in the Caribbean right now, and I do think we have some of these opportunities laid out in front of us. The example he spoke about, where he spoke about our comparative advantages, where we look at what we have as an advantage over some of our Caribbean CARICOM neighbors, and we use that. Caribbean economies at a crossroad. New IDB report. A new report by the Inter-American Development Bank says Caribbean economies are at a crossroad, highlighting progress in economic recovery in most Caribbean economies despite persistent external shocks, but warning that risks remain in the near term. Global and regional economies at a crossroads, released yesterday, notes the region's tourism-oriented economies have recovered more rapidly than expected from the sharp pandemic-induced contraction of 2020. The report said commodity prices have declined, though they remain above pre-pandemic levels. So, the Caribbean region is bouncing back. Joe says, I know persons who have degrees and work at KFC and stores for minimum wage. And here's the thing. First up, I believe there shouldn't be a minimum wage. I don't think there should be a minimum wage. One. Well, our economy expanded by 3%. Our economy grew by 3%, Mashipu, according to the Central Statistical Office. Our economy grew by 3%. Yeah, I think that one, there need not be a minimum wage. The minimum wage is whatever is the minimum your labor is worth. One. Two, we need to understand the importance of entry-level jobs. I don't think you could ever replace the need for entry-level jobs. And the reality is, entry-level jobs are not worth a lot. But the reality once upon a time was supposed to be that entry-level jobs were not supposed to be for people with families trying to mind a wife and 3 children. An entry-level job was supposed to be you finish school or something at 18. You get that entry-level job to understand the working world, understand pay, understand your pay sheets, and etc., 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 and you elevate from there. Now, instead of entry-level jobs, we send our young people to another decade of schooling, institutionalized schooling, and then they leave being just at the cusp of middle age. And then they're 26 looking for an entry-level job, but expecting a salary that is supposed to be able to pay for their wedding, because they have that girlfriend that they want to marry before 30, and they want to try and have some children before 32. So now they're looking for a salary to mind a family. And you're telling them, well, they have no job experience, so the only jobs available are entry level jobs. And they think they are above entry level jobs. Persons with degrees to match a particular job, their job requires 3 to 5 years experience. How? What do you mean how? I could tell you. Part of it has to do, one, with minimum wage, and two, with just wanting better workers. Let me explain those two. One, how minimum wage affects this. If I could have paid a youth man $1 to come and set up my studio for me every night, and he breaks it down every night. I'm calling a ridiculous figure, but if I could have paid him $1, that would have cost me so little, I would have hired somebody. I might have hired 10 people to do it. And now those 10 people would have gotten $1, but they would have been building work experience. And I may have hired somebody from the age of 14, where the $1 isn't too much of a problem because they don't have any bills to pay. But if the law says I must pay you $20 per hour if I hire you, then for sure I'm not hiring any 14-year-old youth men, because I'm not paying them $14 when they don't know what they're doing. I'm not paying them, $20 if they don't know what they're doing. If I have to pay you $20, $20 is what I paid a skilled person. So now, my lowest level worker that I can hire already skilled, because that's the amount I have to pay you. Some companies train some staff to a standard to get experience. Yes, and if payment isn't a problem, most companies wouldn't mind that. You hire some people at a low level and they elevate, and as they elevate, you train them, they become specialized in exactly what you want them to do, and their salary goes up. And that's another thing to prove that minimum wage isn't even necessary. Without minimum wage, people's salaries are already up, would already be up. Nearly no one in this life probably works for minimum wage. Why is that? Because the service or product that you offer is worth more than minimum wage. Minimum wage wasn't necessary for anyone to select your salary. A lot of persons with degrees don't want to hear that. Well, then they would hear nothing. They would hear no return to their calls, and they would be like the lost generation in Japan, 40-something years old, with well-educated and living with their parents. And bear in mind, university degrees get obsolete. If you have a degree that you never used for 10 years, and then you go to a company showing them that degree, it's not going to be of the same value. They use that to exploit workers. Some do, yes. Gate make people feel too entitled. To be honest, cheap college is not right. Most businesses do not adhere to job specifications. My job has nothing to do with my degree. Well, that's the worker they needed. You see, because we were so institutionalized, we learned the economy and reality wrong side. We believe that you go to school and learn a degree, and when you go out into the job sphere, the job is based on your degree. No, it's actually supposed to be vice versa. The jobs are based on needs in society, and the degrees or the education is supposed to be based on making you better adapted to do the job that is necessary for the reality that exists in society. The degree doesn't come before the job. The job is supposed to structure the degree. This kind of over prioritizing of the system of education has been sold to us by universities. It's not reality. It's not reality. It's a narrative that has been sold to us. You can't take in an electrician to be a chef. That is not true, Mr. Boss. I am 100% certain there are electricians who are chefs in the world. So what you are saying is plainly incorrect. Obviously. The job comes first. The job is supposed to determine what the education gives. Millennial V says, real talk, lots of nuggets here, plenty food for thought. Thanks for sharing. You are welcome. Now, something that the IDB was pointing out about this crossroads that the Caribbean economy is at, that I think is something very important to Trinidad and Tobago. In the near term, the report says key macroeconomic risks and economic growth opportunities remain relevant. It says risks include external shocks from commodity prices. So this is a fact. We face the reality of external shocks because we don't control everything as pertaining to our economy. So external shocks, and we buy lots of things from outside there, a potential synchronized downturn in advanced economies, and external financing conditions. So nearly everything on the outside there that we do not control, those are risks. But the report says emerging opportunities include nearshoring, especially for global services. And what nearshoring is exactly what we were talking about with the economists there, where countries or companies use neighboring economies to do some of their business. So if Barbados needs legal services and we have an overpopulation of lawyers here in Trinidad and Tobago, we could provide legal services for Barbados from right here in Trinidad and Tobago. Now, yes, it could be linked to globalization, but this isn't necessarily talking about globalization. And to me, this actually makes more sense than globalization, where it's not like you're trying to get a global market, a global economy, a global community, but you are using your neighbors for their specialties. It makes sense that if Venezuela has natural gas and we have the ability to refine natural gas, that we get the natural gas from Venezuela, refine it in Trinidad and Tobago, Venezuela gains, Trinidad gains, and we sell it to Europe and they get the natural gas they want. The statement for that goes, the rising tide raises all ships. Outsourcing specialization, correct. Other than nearshoring, a renewed impetus for regional integration, especially for agriculture, and strengthening of existing lead sectors with a focus on environmental sustainability and green energy. And I think Trinidad is specially suited for many of these things. And the reality is, Guyana is right there with the oil and gas boom that they are facing, that they are getting. And Trinidad and Tobago is attempting to maximize some of that. We do have a lot of businesses over there in Guyana attempting to maximize that. I think that from a state policy position, making ease of doing business locally and regionally stands that possibility for us really ballooning in our economy. You see, the reality is, I think Trinidad and Tobago, a lot of where we are right now has already moved past some of the industrialization and agriculturalization as the economist spoke about. We want to do some of these more service-oriented industries. If so, partnering with Caribbean countries and CARICOM partners makes a lot of sense. We would have a constant flow of the need for some of the services that we offer. Food for thought. All right, people. Any comments or questions inside of the live before we dive out? ExxonMobil is monopolizing everything in Guyana. Yes, they are, Mashipu. But you know, it's a technical thing. Hello, Herbert Donaldson. It's a technical thing when you think about it, like in Guyana's position. Yes, ExxonMobil is monopolizing. They are kind of advantageous to Guyana in some of their deals, yes. But Guyana didn't have the capability to use their oil all on their own. So, it's like, if you have a resource that would provide you with $0 on its own, but you could invite someone in who is going to take advantage of it, but they will give you some. What do? Kim Jong-un with Putin this week. Fun times ahead. Yeah, I saw that he might visit Russia. Yes, Hubert. I know. I can read that. Alright. Any further comments or questions? You are still awake. Why? Tell the people hello. Any further comments or questions inside of the live before I dive out and the host goes to sleep with your one earring missing? Trinotep says be mindful, not mindless. Correct, bro, correct. Couldn't have said that any better. Alright, if there are no further questions or comments inside of the live, that's all I have for now. I hope you're educated, informed, or entertained. Not like she has school in the morning. I hope you're educated, informed, or entertained, and I will see you guys in the next Mindful Live, which is coming tomorrow, Tuesday, at around 9 p.m. And I will see you then. Tune in. It's a girl. She's a girl. And I will see you guys then for that next Mindful Live tomorrow. Until then, people, stay well, stay knowledgeable. Peace out. Hold it on. Later. Tell the people bye. Say bye. Say bye. Not telling the people bye-bye. Say bye. You want me to do it? Bye-bye. Alright, your turn. You do it. Say bye. Yes, I should have done bye already. Now your turn. Latest